Excellent. Well, great. So thank you for joining the session. Again, Michael, thank you for coming out to Chicago and
My pleasure.
and joining us. Today we're going to talk about digital workflow automation. We know that MRS is a customer of ours. Tell us a little bit about what you do and how you leverage technology within your organization.
So I'll start a little bit about the company. The company MRS BPO has been around, 31 years now, I believe. And it serves 6 different vertical markets, from credit card, auto loan, telecommunications, fintech, cities, like large US cities, as far as parking and tolls. And our normal goal is to be able to collect debt, because with debt, you've got a limited life cycle. So it's kind of interesting. If you think about a grocery store, produce lives for a certain period of time. In our world, debt lives about 180 days. So you have 180 days to be able to actually collect on that particular debt. So myself, I'm a technologist. I come from a technology background. And about 2013, I moved over into the world of risk. And this was driven in large part by our clients. We have 5 of the top 10 banks in the US, 3 of the top 5 telecoms, pretty much every automotive company in the world, except for a couple small ones, all of the largest utilities, the largest cities. So we have a lot, and in a given year, we get about $7 billion worth of debt placed into our systems or into our CRM. So as time's going on, I think everyone knows for the pandemic, digitization became a big deal. Our volume's growing. In our CRM, we have about 40 million customers, and we get about 1 million new customers every single month. So being in technology, my task is to take and look at our systems, make sure that we are in tune with the future. And looking at it from a risk standpoint, since we're in a very highly regulated industry, I need to make sure we can keep track and pace with all the regulations that are coming up. And not to mention regulations, privacy regulations now are really huge. So we've got the federal government, state governments, local governments, and then we have these sort of different laws, from HIPAA to GLB to the various privacy laws like CCPA that govern us. So we need to be able to handle all of those.
Mm-hmm. I think not only handle those, right, but you also have to adapt as they change very rapidly, because those organizations probably don't give you a lot of time to comply, right? They put those compliance regulations in place and expect you to meet them immediately. So I can imagine that having the ability to be nimble and being able to adapt, has to be critical to your business.
It is. And in our current CRM, the technology is about 10 years old. So what we ended up doing, and a lot of companies do this as kind of a defense, is they just start building around it, right? Because they can't get it to do what they want to. So they start building around the CRM with all these different ways to try to create the functionality that you need. And that's one of the great things about Creatio, is it's very flexible and adaptable. And to that point, a lot of our clients they'll say, you have to accomplish this in 15 days or 30 days. And these changes could be massive workflow changes, or they could be regulatory changes. So right now, we've got to scramble and put our different teams on it and do it. But with Creatio, we're able to change and shift it a lot quicker.
That's great. That's great. And so given the overview that you gave, you deal with a lot of different types of organizations. Whether that's healthcare, that's credit cards, automotive. You experience a lot of trends, I would imagine, different trends concerning digital transformation. Do you see any common thread or common trend within digital transformation today?
I would say yes, of course. We see customers, historically, our business, we would call people, right? We would say, oh, blah, 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 blah. We have this. And what's happened now, everything's becoming, whether it's email, digital, social media, other channels. And the other piece that's happening, of course, is all the privacy laws. So it used to be, and I know this sounds really ridiculous, what we would do is we would call you up on the phone and we would say, hi, this call is for Sue. And Sue would say, okay, who are you? And we would say, oh, it's MRS. And then we would say, based upon our clients and the different things that they gave to us, we would have to ask people for information. So we'd have to ask them based upon our clients. We would say, what is your date of birth? What is your social security number? What is this? What is your account number? Now imagine getting a call from someone who you don't know and they're asking you privacy information. Most people go click. That's just the way it is in today's world, with everyone becoming much more aware of privacy. But across email and text and social media, people are actually much more, I'll call it, maybe at ease or something, because the phone has been used for so many scams and spams that people have gotten used to that channel and they no longer trust it as much as they do a digital channel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can. It's such a tough industry, and having sat in a few call centers, listening to the process that most collectors have to go through. It's amazing. And one thing that I wanted to ask and curious how you manage this at MRS is where you're collecting on behalf of third parties. So there are specific thresholds that people are expecting you to collect on their behalf. Being able to negotiate maybe a little lower settlement on those. So I noticed that there's a lot of workflow that happens in that process, right? So as that collector is talking, maybe someone wants to settle, a little less. That involves an approval. That approval has to go somebody. It comes back. You make that offer. Many different systems and parts of that workflow. How important is it for MRS to connect that entire process and make it, seamless? So that way you're not, having to put people on hold for long periods of time. Because again, if you're on hold, they're going to hang up as well. So how important is it to connect those digital workflows through that process?
Well, obviously, it's very important to connect the dots.
Yeah.
And I'll just back up 1 second before we even get to that point. People are funny animals, and just the people in this room, I would bet to you that the way that people communicate or the way that you want to be communicated with is different. I'll give you an example. For each of us, there's a formula. And I'm sure each of us has gotten phone calls, probably text messages, probably emails. But for each of us, there's a unique key. And what I mean by that is, and just to connect the digital workflows, if you actually don't mind, I'll stand.
No, that's perfectly fine.
So and I'll just pick on a few people here, since you're close to me. I would guess that people have sent you 3 or 4 emails or 5 emails, and you probably have gotten them and you haven't responded. But if I call you once or I text you once, and then I send you a few more emails, you might be more inclined. These different things, we each have different, I'll call it interests or things that touch us. Some people, and you all probably know the person, know the people, and maybe you're like this, you get a phone call, you don't know who it is, and you answer it. Some people just do that. And some people, like you and me, we don't, right? I get a call, I don't know who it is. It's like, there's no way I'm answering that phone. No way at all. And same thing like with emails. I get a million sales emails, right? So people email me, but I'm funny. So it probably takes about 15 emails for me to actually go, you know what? I think that's probably a real vendor. It's probably not spam. And by then I go, you know what? let me go take a look. And after probably about 20 emails, maybe I'll actually respond. If someone calls me, the answer is no. I will not answer it if I don't know the number. But interestingly enough, if someone texts me and I don't know who it is, and it seems kind of interesting, maybe related, I think maybe it's a salesperson trying to reach out to me, I might. So each of us has, I'll call it a formula. Back to your point, Eric.
Yeah.
There's a formula that each of us connects with, that each of us finds meaningful. And we have the same thing in people relationships, right? We all meet people and their approaches work, right? Someone might go, hi. Other people might go, yeah, how you doing? You know, we all have different things that are meaningful to us. And so one of the cool things that we are rethinking is how do we orchestrate this digital understanding? Because most people now, if they see 3 or 4 phone calls or 5 phone calls, they go, oh, it's spam. I don't know who this is. One of the hard things about collections is when a creditor places debt with a collection agency, they don't tell the customer. So let's say you have a Bank of America account, and unfortunately you go into debt and it gets charged off after 6 months. Bank of America will take and place it with a collection agency. Do they tell you they're doing that? No. And nor do they tell you which collection agency that they're placing it with. So all of a sudden, you start getting calls from ABC company, and your inclination is, I don't know who they are. I don't know what they want. And you hang up. Interestingly, in federal law, it doesn't allow you to tell what the call is about until the person's verified. So, for instance, I'm calling you and I'm going, hi, this is blah, blah, blah. And you say, what do you want? And I go, I can't tell you. But if you give me your social security number, I can tell you. Right. And you go, oh, yeah, what? Well, you know what? How about your date of birth? Oh, what about your account number? What about this? What about that? You don't know who I am, why I'm calling, nothing else. But federal law prevents us from giving information about why we're calling until we get that information. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. But all of this comes from the old English laws where and it's called third-party disclosure. So I can't say anything about your debt with him or her or anyone else. That's considered to be a horrible thing because debt is extremely personal. In a lot of states, we can't even disclose to a spouse, a legally joined spouse, that other person has a debt. It's just, these debt laws are very interesting. So Creatio helps us reimagine and take all of these different data points, put it together to kind of find this, I'll call it a contact formula. And it's just one piece of the overall process in the loan process, or really even in the credit process that has to be reimagined.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can't imagine the amount of regulatory pressure that you have, right? Laws are changing. You have to keep up with that. You also made a great point on ways that you have to kind of get creative, right? Because again, you're calling somebody out of the blue. Nobody wants to verify. A question that I would have is, how do you innovate, right? Like, how do you come up with new ideas and yet, so whether that's managing multiple channels of ways of communication, how do you innovate while still remaining compliant? That's got to be a very delicate balance between the two.
And it really is. And I'll tell you something that I found out recently. And I'm going to tell you all something here for the first time. I guarantee you've never heard this before. Seriously. So, and Creatio doesn't even tell you this, which is really something. So Creatio has this really cool feature from a regulatory perspective that And I found this out completely matter-of-factly when we were going through a recent flow. Creatio built something for us. And we were looking at it, and I asked a question. And the question was, to your point, when you're heavily regulated, and let me just ask you a question. What's the weakest link in any process?
People.
You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. You got it right the first time. People are always the weakest link. So a lot of regulatory controls are built around putting guardrails around people, putting guardrails around what people can do. So I'll give you a for instance. There's a new federal law called Reg F that says you can only contact someone 7 times in 7 days unless they give you permission to call them more often. And let me tell you, not too many people do that. So we put a rule in there. We have what we call it a global rule that says you cannot call someone more than 7 times a day. So now, the cool thing about rules and the cool things about programming is you think that just because you put it in, that it works, right? And this other really cool thing is after you put it in, that it's going to stay working. That nobody's going to come along and change it, some software update or whatever it may be comes along and breaks it. And how do you know that it got broken? Well, in our industry, we get a lawsuit. You did this, da-da-da-da-da. And of course we go, oh, that can't be. So then you research it and you go, oh my God, how'd that happen? So Creatio, I'm trying to build up suspense here a little bit. Creatio has this cool capability. I mean, it really blew me away the first time I saw it. I went, what? You've got that? So you are designing these things, you build these rules in, and these rules, by the way, I know we're talking about loan recovery or collections or whatever you want to call it, accounts receivable, payables management, but pretty much all industries have regulations, and all industries now are using something called RegTech, or regulation technology. Often, companies are buying these technologies and bolting them on because their products don't have the ability to handle these rules and controls. Now, that word controls is so important because with the software, you can build a control to do this, you can build a control to do that, build a control to do that. You can create an inventory of controls. So back to the example of 7 calls in 7 days, how do I know that's working? Well, the old way of knowing a control is working for every single control, you would go to someone and you would say, would you please call this number 8 times and see if it works, right? So the 7 calls should work, but the 8th one should give you an error. So someone has to do that manually, whether that control is calling, and just think about all the different states all have their own controls. There's tons of different outreaches, whether it's text, email, all of these different things. So we went through, we built all these controls. And so I asked, how can we test them? And Alexi, who was our BA at Creatio, goes, oh, you just do it like this. And I was stunned because Creatio has this really cool capability that you can go in and you can test every rule that you've created. No matter how you've created it, you can test it in production without affecting production, and it'll tell you whether or not that rule worked. It is an unbelievable capability. So let me say it again a little bit differently. So imagine you've got operations out there building all these rules and doing all these things, and your compliance department comes along and goes, how do I know what you built is right? Well, you can now independently go through and test all the different rules that are in there. and verify that they work. And in fact, not only can you go through and do it, you can actually automate that so that you can have an alert sent if that rule gets broken, that rule stops working. Because we found when we were building rules, it's called contact support group. And they handle all the dialing, campaigns, emails, texting. They went through and they built rules that they thought worked. So my team went in and they checked all the rules using this built-in Creatio tool and found that 4 rules didn't work. Why? They went through and they made a mistake when they were building the rule. Now, we never would have known that until it'd gone through to production and they had made mistakes or a customer had complained. So we were able to, through this capability in Creatio that they don't tell you about, which is really cool, to test all of the things that we had built. And I got to tell you, I was blown away. So I told the owners of the company, 2 co-CEOs who I work for, Creatio does this. And they looked at me and went, no, it doesn't. I said, yeah, it does. They didn't believe it. So I told our COO, hey, you guys can build all your own stuff now. You don't need IT to build all these rules, which is how we do it now. He was like, come on, Michael. Yeah, just be serious. I went, no, really. You see all these rules? I showed him all this list. I said, your team built those rules to mimic what they had. And they built it all in 40 minutes, where it had taken the IT team about 2 months previously to create that. And I said, not only that, we found that 4 of those rules didn't work. And he went, how'd you do that? And I said, I explained it to him. He went, he got it. He was like, oh my God, that's great. So that meant his team could now do whatever hell they wanted to, and we could come along and verify it. But even better, they could verify it themselves before they put it into production. Because all of these regulatory things have consequences. And while, I talk about lawsuits or people complaining, what you're really afraid of is like things like the CFPB or the federal regulatory bodies, because they're the ones that come in and they find these problems that you don't know about. And they look at all your complaints and they go, what are you doing about it? And you're not doing anything. And you can't prove or demonstrate you've done something to solve these problems. You're in a world of hurt. You really are. Excuse my language, but you're just fucked if you can't do that.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I think that brings us to the end of our time, Michael. I know Jason and I will be building our rules engine and messaging into our pitch decks going forward. So thank you for bringing that to our attention, and thank you for your great insight. I hope the audience found it very valuable.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. That's great.